Welcome back to the Paul Chandler Show, everyone. I'm your host, Paul Chandler. So in our last episode, we looked at how we coded bronchoscopies. In today's episode, we're using the Padzilla again, and we'll be actually looking at a bronchoscopy procedure being performed, but don't worry, this one is an animated video. And I'll be explaining what's going on while the provider is doing the bronchoscopy procedure itself. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. We'll be analyzing on the Padzilla the bronchoscopy surgical procedure. And now that we're back, we're using the Padzilla here, and we'll be looking at a bronchoscopy, and I'll be explaining a little bit of the pre-op and post-op work for the bronchoscopy as well. So you can see here with the bronchoscopy, the purpose of it is to evaluate the airways of the patient going down in the lungs. So we have the lungs and then the patient's diaphragm. Patient could be having symptoms such as coughing up blood, noisy or abnormal breathing, and they also have a chest x-ray that has some abnormal results. They may end up having a bronchoscopy, because that's what we're doing is put it down a scope. So a patient will have local anesthesia applied, generally through the back of the throat and the top of the nose and mouth area there as well. And then the patient also may have a sedative placed. That way it'll help them just relax during the procedure itself and help control their breathing. It is minimally invasive, and it's also important to understand the possible risks of being involved, because just like any surgery that a patient can have, there are risks that can develop. Now, as you are preparing for a bronchoscopy, a little bit easier than a colonoscopy, for example, but you still want to refrain from food and drink for about 6 hours before. And also you do want to double check with your provider. Let them know any medications. They should ask you which medications you're on, especially blood thinners, or for example, a diabetes medication. But just in case if they don't, make sure that you let your provider know. That way, because it could have possible interactions with the anesthesia or with the scope as it goes down. Now then, with the procedure itself, because one thing with the 6 hours of fasting and continuing to take your normal medicine though, after that 6 hours, so doing the bronchoscopy, they'll have the flexible scope. So this is like the joystick that the doctor's holding and driving it with their thumb. And they'll have a flexible scope go down. And as the scope's going down, it'll usually go through the nose. It can go through the mouth depending on what type of procedure is going on. But the doctor will put it down a little bit by a little bit into the trachea, for example, and then into the bronchus, and it'll split to the left or right bronchus, depending on which lungs they're looking at. And the entire procedure itself, depending how far invasive they want to go in, lasts anywhere between 20 to 16 minutes, again, depending how far the provider's going down. Now, after the surgery, though, there are some issues the patient may develop. They may have a sore throat, for example. They may have a little bit of nosebleed. They may have blood-stained sputum. They may also get a little fever, possibly, but that usually will all resolve within 24 hours. Now, upon the completion itself, then the patient will be sent to recovery for about an hour post-op, no matter if it's outpatient or inpatient surgery. And they should also get a brief summary on the bronchoscopy. It just maybe like the initial results before the full report is written, and then return to outpatient review, follow-up if necessary, meaning have follow-up visits based on what those final results are. So you can see with the bronchoscopy, since breaking down the big fancy word, bronchoscopy, so is the scope going down the bronchus, that you are, with a sedative even, or even local anesthesia though, you should have someone accompany you, and a lot of providers will not even do the surgery unless they see a person there waiting for you as well. Because that's why, everyone has different reactions to anesthesia, so just in case, have someone drive you home afterwards on itself. And so looking at that bronchoscopy procedure, not very invasive, we're not cutting open the chest or the abdomen, and it's a scope going down the nose or the mouth, and then it go down the trachea, split into the left and or right bronchus. Again, as we saw on the anatomy illustration, the provider went down the scope a little bit by a little bit there. So if the provider does a diagnostic scope first, it'll put it down, the camera will see what's going on. If nothing comes up, then that's all that they do. If there's something that the doctor wants to do on the surgery side, they'll retract out that diagnostic scope, then put the surgical scope in with the correct tool, and just going down the trachea and the bronchus, and then retract it out, and that's it. It's just a nice simple procedure, no cutting open on the patient, just a little bit recovery afterwards, and that's all she'll wrote for the bronchoscopy. So for all of us here, the cast and crew of the Paul Chandler Show, we do thank you for watching. Live long, do good, and prosper.